I always think for a long time about what I could say on this night. And it sits with me, and I try to come at it from every possible angle. And how much time do you have? A few days ago, I was engaged in an annual ritual that we take part in this culture called Christmas shopping. And I noticed that I was getting kind of grumpy. And there seemed to be lines everywhere, and traffic was slow, and I didn't seem to be looking for the best in people. And it was dark and rainy, kind of miserable night. And then I thought about the story and how Swedenborg tells us that the story itself hits us on every level. It talks about our whole culture, our countries, and us as individuals. And all the characters are laid out for us to play those parts over and over again and learn from them each time we play. The wicked king is within us. The innocent virgin, the babe in the manger, all those sweet qualities as well. The wise men who came from afar, following the star. The shepherds, Joseph. And so I pulled into the Stonehouse bookstore to do a little more shopping. And there was a lady there who, her battery was dead. And I didn't know her, but somebody mentioned her battery was dead, and I happened to have trumper cables, and so went out there and took 5 minutes, and she was extremely grateful, and she was gone. And I noticed that my mood had completely changed. I was no longer grumpy. It felt good to help somebody. I thought, is it that easy? Is it that easy? And then I got to thinking about this year. There's a film out, and there have been many things about in the news. There have been some things on TV about how there are between 30 and 50 stories, depending on how you look at it, in ancient cultures, where they all have within them wise men who followed the star, a virgin who gave birth, a death, and a resurrection, and most of them have a wicked king thrown in there as well. And some people looked at this and saw this as that really it undermined the story about the birth of Jesus. And I thought to myself, why wouldn't people think that it confirms the story? Do we look so easily for things to doubt? But instead to look at it of how it is so deep within human consciousness as a paradigm that it's expressed over and over again in many cultures about how, no matter how dark the night may be, that God will show us the way to follow the star. And those people who have their spiritual eyes open can see that star to follow. And the way we open our spiritual eyes is simply to look for love. And so instead, think that this story was written for you, and that it is perfect in every way, and that it has within it the power to give your life all the magic you miss. Doesn't that change the story? That it is laid out there for us, and think for a moment that you are more powerful than you have ever imagined yourself to be. And that by believing in how God is present and leads us, no matter how far it is that we may drift away, that therein lies a greater power than we have ever used in our entire lives. I love reading stories. And I read a story that I never seen before. You remember back in when Boris Yeltsin was president of Russia, and they lined up all these tanks around the presidential palace, and he announced that he was not a communist, and so they were going to take over, and so all these tanks were lined up, they're ready to start shooting. Do you remember what happened? Do you remember how it stopped? There was one Russian lady who got on the phone and called a dozen people, other women, and said, you call a dozen people and head down there to the square and bring candy bars and cigarettes. And so they all converged on the square, and they went up and they knocked on the door of the tanks. And they said to these young men in the tanks, are you going to shoot and kill your own mothers and children? And they gave them the candy bars and the cigarettes. And they backed their tanks out of there, and it was over. A power beyond what we really believe that we have. It took courage, it was conviction, but it was done from righteousness and from love and to do what needed to be done. That is part of how the story of Christmas is acted out over and over again. Those of you who heard part of this earlier, Swedenborg says that the wise men, that the reason people did not see the star, like, isn't it kind of funny that there are all these wise men follow it for 3 months from Iran to Israel, and nobody but them sees the star? And they come to King Herod from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. It was only about 12 miles. They couldn't see the star. And it says that the star appeared before them, and they followed it until it went right over the manger. Swedenborg says that it's because their spiritual eyes were open. It was a spiritual star. That was why they saw it. I think that we have been in the habit for quite a while of looking for the negative. And when we do that, our spiritual eyes close. When we doubt, when we look at the things that can go wrong and have doubts about the future, we are in the dark and we are not following that star. The United Nations put out a report not long ago that said that since the Cold War has ended, the number of conflicts has gone down 40% in the world. And the number, and they have a way of measuring it, the number of major conflicts is when more than 1,000 people are killed in one country or groups fighting against each other, has gone down 80%. That's good news. And that there are more and more things happening that are examples of how there is the desire within us to reconcile and not look for what is different, but to look for what is common. And I believe to my bones that this is an example of how that Christ child, of how God is manifesting in the hearts and minds of people, as together we come to realize that working with God, we have the power to change the world. The simple message that he gave us was that we must believe that love makes a difference. That it is the only thing